The inevitable decline. Echoes of empires past in the modern United States. All empires eventually collapse. This is an undeniable truth, regardless of their longevity or the extent of their influence. From the Roman Empire, which dominated for over a millennium, to the sprawling Ottoman Empire, and even the USSR, which reshaped modern geopolitics, none have been immune to decline. These historical behemoths, once seemingly invincible, ultimately succumb to a complex interplay of internal weaknesses, external pressures, and a failure to adapt to changing circumstances. The question, therefore, is not if an empire will fall, but when and how. So, is the empire we live under today also in decline? The answer increasingly appears to be yes. The real question is, how quickly? And perhaps more importantly, what can be learned from the past to mitigate the potential consequences of this decline? We, in the present day, enjoy resources and opportunities unmatched by previous generations. Technological advancements have connected the world in unprecedented ways, and economic prosperity, while unevenly distributed, has lifted millions out of poverty. Yet American democracy is faltering, and the United States can no longer unequivocally claim to be the greatest nation in the world. A confluence of factors, both internal and external, suggests that the U.S. empire is unraveling. History offers invaluable lessons, providing clear indicators of this impending downfall. By examining the trajectories of past empires, we can gain a deeper understanding of the challenges facing the United States and potentially mitigate the most severe consequences. This requires a critical and honest assessment of the nation's strengths and weaknesses, a willingness to learn from past mistakes, and a commitment to addressing the underlying issues that threaten its long-term stability. This analysis will delve into three critical aspects of imperial decline, drawing parallels between historical examples and the current state of the United States. First, we will explore the internal decay that plagued the Roman Empire, examining the parallels in modern America's economic inequality, crumbling infrastructure, and political corruption. We will analyze how these internal fractures weaken the fabric of society, erode public trust, and ultimately undermine the empire's ability to function effectively. Second, we will analyze the erosion of soft power, drawing lessons from the Ottoman Empire and highlighting the declining credibility and moral authority of the United States on the global stage. We will explore how the loss of soft power diminishes an empire's ability to influence other nations through persuasion and attraction, forcing it to rely more heavily on costly and often counterproductive hard power tactics. Finally, we will discuss the dangers of overextension and unsustainable military spending, using the British Empire as a cautionary tale and assessing the implications for American foreign policy. We will examine how the relentless pursuit of global dominance can strain an empire's resources, divert attention from domestic priorities, and ultimately lead to its financial ruin. The fall of the Roman Empire, internal decay, and its modern echoes. Hail Caesar! The Roman Empire, at its zenith, governed millions across vast territories, stretching from the misty shores of Britain to the sun-baked deserts of North Africa, and from the Iberian Peninsula to the fertile lands of the Middle East. Its enduring legacy is visible in cities worldwide, a testament to its power and reach. Roman engineering marvels such as aqueducts, roads, and amphitheaters continue to inspire awe and admiration centuries after their construction. Rome was unmatched in strength and influence, a cultural and military powerhouse that shaped the course of Western civilization. But after 1,000 years of dominance, it fell, not overnight, but through gradual erosion, a death by 1,000 cuts. This slow and agonizing decline serves as a stark reminder that even the most powerful empires are not immune to the forces of decay. The Roman Empire's collapse was marked by countless small failures, but one stands out as particularly significant: internal decay. At its height, Rome appeared invincible from external threats. The legions were the most formidable fighting force in the world, and the empire's vast resources seemed inexhaustible. Yet its downfall began from within, fueled by a stark and ever-widening divide between the elite and the common people. This internal stratification created a breeding ground for resentment, instability, and ultimately the unraveling of the empire's social fabric. The wealthy lived extravagantly in sprawling estates, known as villas, indulging in opulent feasts served by scantily clad attendants. These aristocratic families controlled vast holdings across the empire, akin to modern multinational corporations in their wealth and influence, wealth so immense it defies comprehension. They amassed fortunes through land ownership, trade, and political corruption, often exploiting the labor of slaves and the peasantry to further enrich themselves. Their lavish lifestyles were a far cry from the harsh realities faced by the majority of Roman citizens. Imagine the sheer scale of these estates, the intricate mosaics adorning their floors, the private bathhouses heated by elaborate systems, and the constant flow of exotic goods from across the empire, spices from the East, silks from China, and precious metals from distant lands. This level of luxury was not merely comfortable, it was a blatant display of power and privilege, a constant reminder of the vast inequalities that permeated Roman society. These villas were not just homes, they were symbols of Roman opulence and decadence, a stark contrast to the poverty and squalor that existed just beyond their walls. Meanwhile, ordinary citizens endured harsh realities: menial labor, subsistence diets of bread and porridge, and overcrowded housing prone to disease and collapse. The vast majority of Romans lived in cramped and unsanitary conditions, often sharing living spaces with multiple families. They worked long hours in grueling jobs, often as farmers, laborers, or craftsmen, earning barely enough to survive. The contrast between the opulent lives of the elite and the meager existence of the common people was stark, breeding resentment and social unrest. Imagine living in a cramped apartment building known as an insula, constantly fearing the spread of disease, working long hours for meager wages, and struggling to feed your family. The threat of fire was ever present, and the lack of sanitation made these buildings breeding grounds for disease. This was the reality for the vast majority of Romans, a far cry from the idealized image of Roman prosperity. They were constantly vulnerable to economic hardship, political instability, and the whims of the wealthy elite. To placate the masses, emperors provided food and entertainment, what we now call bread and circuses. Public spectacles such as gladiatorial combats and chariot races were used to distract the population from their daily struggles and maintain a semblance of order. These events were lavishly funded and widely attended, providing a temporary escape from the harsh realities of everyday life. Grain was distributed to the poor, but this was often insufficient to meet their needs, and the system was rife with corruption. Officials often skimmed off the top, selling grain on the black market and leaving the poor with barely enough to survive. Even these measures weren't enough to stave off unrest. Famines, revolts, slavery, and an unfair tax system that burdened the poor while sparing the rich all contributed to Rome's decline, creating a volatile atmosphere of discontent. The burden of taxation fell disproportionately on the lower classes, while the wealthy elite were able to evade their fair share, further exacerbating economic inequalities. Slave revolts, such as the Spartacus Uprising, demonstrated the simmering anger and resentment of the enslaved population. Rome entered a period of irreversible decay. The middle class shrank as economic inequality widened between the elite and the impoverished masses, fueling resentment and instability. The rise of large-scale agriculture, known as latifundia, displaced small farmers and drove them into poverty, further contributing to the decline of the middle class. This internal decay weakened Rome's foundations, making it vulnerable to external pressures. Corruption ran rampant, with politicians enriching themselves at the public's expense and passing laws that benefited only the wealthy elite. Bribery, extortion, and embezzlement were commonplace, undermining the integrity of the Roman government. The decline of infrastructure, mismanagement of resources, and dependence on an overburdened military further sealed Rome's fate. Roads crumbled, aqueducts deteriorated, and public buildings fell into disrepair, symbolizing the decay of Roman power and efficiency. The cost of maintaining a vast military stretched the empire's resources thin, diverting funds from essential infrastructure projects and social programs. Additionally, Rome's economy suffered from over-reliance on slave labor. As territorial expansion slowed, so did the supply of enslaved workers, crippling production. The lack of technological innovation also hindered economic growth, as Roman society remained largely reliant on manual labor. Inflation soared, and the once prosperous empire found itself unable to sustain its ambitious projects and military campaigns. The devaluation of the Roman currency, the denarius, further exacerbated the problem, eroding confidence in the Roman economy and fueling social unrest. These economic woes further divided the population, leading to internal conflict and weakening the empire's core. Beyond economic issues, Rome's military strength also eroded. The empire stretched itself too thin, relying on mercenaries who lacked loyalty to Rome. These foreign soldiers were often more interested in personal gain than in defending the empire, and their presence further destabilized Roman society. The integration of barbarian tribes into the Roman army also diluted its effectiveness, as these soldiers often lacked the discipline and training of the Roman legions. As invasions from Germanic tribes and internal civil wars escalated, Rome found itself unable to defend its borders, ultimately leading to its fall. The once mighty Roman legions were weakened by corruption, complacency, and a lack of resources, making them vulnerable to external threats. The constant infighting between rival generals and political factions further weakened the empire's ability to respond to external threats. The American parallels. A crumbling dream. What parallels can we draw with modern America? For decades, the middle class symbolized the American dream: home ownership with a white picket fence, reliable transportation, quality education for children, and a lifestyle envied worldwide, all achievable through hard work. This promise of upward mobility was a cornerstone of American identity and a source of national pride. The idea that anyone, regardless of their background, could achieve success through hard work and determination was a powerful draw for immigrants from around the world. But today, that dream feels increasingly unattainable for many Americans. The gap between the rich and the poor has widened to levels unseen since the Gilded Age, creating a society increasingly divided along economic lines. The top 1% of Americans now control a greater share of the nation's wealth than the bottom 90%, a stark indication of the growing economic inequality. The promise of equal opportunity has become a hollow echo for many, as systemic barriers and economic inequalities limit their chances of success. Factors such as access to quality education, healthcare, and affordable housing play a significant role in determining an individual's life chances, and these opportunities are not equally distributed across American society. Some skip meals because they can't afford food. The rise in food insecurity is a stark reminder of the economic hardships faced by many Americans. According to recent statistics, millions of Americans struggle to put food on the table, and the number is likely to increase due to rising inflation and economic uncertainty. Food banks are struggling to keep up with the demand, and families are forced to make difficult choices between paying for food, rent, or health care. Homelessness has surged by 12% in just 1 year, a visible manifestation of the growing economic disparities and the lack of affordable housing. The shortage of affordable housing is a major contributor to homelessness, as many Americans are unable to find housing they can afford. Tent cities have sprung up in major cities across the country, a stark reminder of the human cost of economic inequality. These makeshift communities lack basic sanitation and healthcare services, creating a breeding ground for disease and social problems. Hundreds of thousands rely on crowdfunding for medical expenses, highlighting the inadequacies of the American healthcare system and the financial burden placed on individuals and families. The high cost of healthcare in the United States has made it the leading cause of bankruptcy, leaving many Americans with crushing debt and limited access to care. A single illness or accident can bankrupt a family, leaving them with crushing debt and limited access to care. Wages have stagnated while corporate profits have skyrocketed, mirroring the growing divide seen in the waning years of Rome. The benefits of economic growth have disproportionately flowed to the top, while the wages of ordinary workers have remained stagnant, leading to a sense of resentment and frustration. The decline of union membership and the rise of the gig economy have contributed to wage stagnation as workers have less bargaining power and fewer protections. Infrastructure is crumbling. Roads, bridges, airports, and seaports are outdated or deteriorating, hindering economic growth and posing safety risks. The American Society of Civil Engineers gives the U.S. infrastructure a grade of C-, highlighting the urgent need for investment and modernization. Decades of neglect and underfunding have left the nation's infrastructure in a state of disrepair, creating a bottleneck for economic activity and posing a threat to public safety. Rising costs at grocery stores and gas stations strain household budgets monthly, squeezing the middle class and making it harder for families to make ends meet. Inflation has eroded purchasing power, making it more difficult for ordinary Americans to afford basic necessities. The rising cost of energy and food has a disproportionate impact on low-income families, who spend a larger percentage of their income on these essential items. Proposed changes threaten higher taxes for average families while exacerbating income inequality, further widening the gap between the rich and the poor. Tax policies that favor the wealthy and corporations have contributed to the growing economic disparities, shifting the tax burden onto the middle class and working families. The repeal of the estate tax and the reduction of corporate tax rates have disproportionately benefited the wealthy, while leaving ordinary Americans with a larger share of the tax burden. The wealthiest 10% control nearly all economic power, while the lower middle class clings to just 0.3%. This concentration of wealth at the top has created a system where the rich get richer, while the poor struggle to survive. The lack of economic mobility makes it difficult for individuals to climb the economic ladder, perpetuating inequality across generations. The poorest aren't just excluded, they're burdened with debt they can't escape. Student loan debt, credit card debt, and medical debt have trapped millions in cycles of poverty with no foreseeable way out. The burden of debt stifles economic growth by limiting consumer spending and investment. Student loan debt, in particular, has become a major drag on the economy, preventing young adults from buying homes, starting businesses, and saving for retirement. These debts act as a constant drag on the economy, limiting consumer spending and hindering economic growth. Many Americans struggle with rent or mortgage payments, student loans, or car repayments as wages stagnate while living costs soar. The dream of home ownership has become increasingly elusive for many, as rising housing prices and stagnant wages make it difficult to save for a down payment. The lack of affordable housing options forces many Americans to spend a large percentage of their income on rent, leaving them with little money for other necessities. Meanwhile, the wealthy grow richer by exploiting workers' labor and resources, further exacerbating the problem. The concentration of economic power in the hands of a few has allowed them to extract wealth from the economy, leaving ordinary workers with a smaller share of the pie. The decline of union membership and the erosion of worker protections have made it easier for corporations to exploit their workers and suppress wages. For instance, Elon Musk recently became the world's richest individual with a net worth exceeding $400 billion, an emblem of growing economic disparity. While innovation and entrepreneurship should be encouraged, the concentration of such vast wealth in the hands of a single individual raises questions about the fairness and sustainability of the current economic system. The debate over wealth inequality has intensified in recent years, with some arguing that it is a natural consequence of a free market economy, while others contend that it is a sign of systemic flaws that need to be addressed. CEOs of major corporations make over 300 times what the average worker earns, a level of inequality unseen since the Gilded Age. This vast disparity in compensation reflects a system where corporate executives are rewarded handsomely, while the wages of ordinary workers remain stagnant. The justification for such high executive compensation is often based on the idea that it is necessary to attract and retain top talent, but critics argue that it is excessive and unjustified, given the performance of many companies. Political corruption has also played a significant role in America's decline. Lobbyists and corporations exert disproportionate influence over lawmakers, ensuring policies that benefit the wealthy elite while disregarding the needs of the working class. The influence of money in politics has become a major concern, as wealthy individuals and corporations are able to use their resources to shape legislation and regulatory policy. The revolving door between government and the private sector allows powerful individuals to profit from their connections and influence, further eroding public trust. Former government officials often take jobs in the industries they once regulated, creating a potential for conflicts of interest. Government bailouts favor large banks and corporations, leaving struggling citizens to fend for themselves in economic crises. The perception that the government is more responsive to the needs of the wealthy and well-connected has fueled a sense of anger and resentment among ordinary Americans. This perceived unfairness has fueled a sense of resentment and anger among ordinary Americans, who feel that the system is rigged against them. The erosion of social cohesion further exacerbates America's challenges. The rise of misinformation, extreme political polarization, and growing distrust in institutions contribute to unrest. The spread of fake news and conspiracy theories has eroded public trust in institutions and made it more difficult to have reasoned debates about important issues. Social media has played a significant role in the spread of misinformation, as algorithms often prioritize sensational and emotionally charged content over accurate and reliable information. Just as Rome's civil strife led to instability, the United States faces similar societal divisions that weaken its ability to address critical issues. The increasing polarization of American politics has made it more difficult to find common ground and address the challenges facing the nation. The rise of partisan media outlets has further exacerbated the problem, as viewers are increasingly exposed to information that reinforces their existing beliefs, leading to a hardening of political positions. These trends are not isolated. They're interconnected symptoms of an empire in decline. Like Rome before it, America faces challenges that threaten its stability and future prosperity. The widening gap between the rich and the poor, the crumbling infrastructure, the political corruption, and the erosion of social cohesion are all warning signs that the American dream is fading. The decline of the middle class, the rising cost of living, and the increasing burden of debt are all contributing to a sense of unease and insecurity among ordinary Americans. The erosion of soft power. Lessons from the Ottoman Empire. An empire is not just its central power, it's a network of vassal states serving the core's interests. Maintaining control over these entities requires both soft power and hard power. Hard power, the use of military and economic force, is often costly and unsustainable in the long run. The use of military force can lead to prolonged conflicts, loss of life, and the creation of new enemies. Economic sanctions can hurt the targeted country's economy, but they can also have unintended consequences for the imposing country. Soft power, the ability to persuade others through attraction and influence, is a more effective and sustainable way to maintain imperial dominance. Soft power relies on cultural exchange, diplomacy, and the promotion of shared values. It can be a more cost-effective way to achieve foreign policy goals, as it does not require the use of force or coercion. The Ottoman Empire was one of history's most powerful and enduring empires, spanning 3 continents at its height. From its capital in Constantinople, now Istanbul, the Ottoman Empire controlled vast territories in southeastern Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. The Ottomans were a hub of cultural and scientific innovation, producing advancements in medicine, astronomy, architecture, and engineering that changed the world. Ottoman scholars made significant contributions to mathematics, cartography, and navigation. Ottoman architecture blended Islamic and Byzantine styles, creating unique and impressive structures such as the Süleymaniye Mosque in Istanbul. The Ottoman Empire's cultural influence extended far beyond its borders, shaping the art, music, and cuisine of many regions. They ruled a diverse mix of peoples and faiths, with a history of complex coexistence. The Ottoman Empire's ability to manage its diverse population was a key factor in its longevity and success. The millet system allowed different religious communities to govern themselves according to their own laws and customs, fostering a degree of autonomy and tolerance. However, one factor contributing to their demise was the erosion of their soft power. Soft power involves persuading others to comply without coercion, often through diplomacy and cultural influence. The Ottoman Empire's decline was not solely due to military defeats or economic woes. It was also due to a loss of legitimacy and prestige on the world stage. The rise of nationalist movements within the empire's diverse populations challenged Ottoman authority and undermined its ability to maintain control through persuasion. Over time, the Ottoman Empire's ability to foster loyalty among diverse groups was weakened by rising nationalism within these communities. The spread of nationalist ideas among the various ethnic and religious groups within the Ottoman Empire led to increased calls for independence and self-determination. The influence of European powers who supported nationalist movements in the Balkans further undermined Ottoman authority. The Greeks were among the first to rebel against Ottoman rule, marking the beginning of the empire's decline. The Greek War of Independence inspired other nationalist movements within the Ottoman Empire, further weakening its control over its diverse population. The Balkan Wars in the early 20th century resulted in the loss of most of the Ottoman Empire's European territories, marking a significant decline in its power and influence. Similarly, the U.S. has historically been adept at wielding soft power. After World War II, it positioned itself as a global leader, promoting democracy, economic growth, and cultural influence. The Marshall Plan, which provided economic assistance to war-torn Europe, was a prime example of American soft power in action. The United States also used its cultural influence to promote its values and ideals around the world through movies, music, and television. American culture became a global phenomenon, shaping trends in fashion, entertainment, and consumerism. However, for soft power to be effective, it requires credibility and moral consistency. The United States' ability to project soft power has been undermined by its inconsistent foreign policy and its perceived hypocrisy in promoting democracy abroad, while supporting authoritarian regimes for strategic purposes. The support for dictatorships in Latin America and the Middle East has damaged the United States' reputation as a champion of democracy. Despite its historical violations of these principles, many people have traditionally been willing to overlook them and buy into the American dream. The promise of freedom, opportunity, and prosperity has long been a powerful draw for immigrants from around the world. The United States has been seen as a land of opportunity, where anyone, regardless of their background, can achieve success through hard work and determination. But this illusion is now crumbling. Recent events such as the storming of the Capitol have damaged the USS image at home and abroad. the attack on American democracy has undermined the United States' credibility as a champion of democratic values. The widespread dissemination of misinformation and conspiracy theories has further eroded trust in American institutions. Internationally, the U.S. has been involved in devastating wars, crippling debt, human rights violations, and environmental damage, making it harder to take its preaching of democracy and freedom seriously. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan have tarnished the United States' image and led to widespread resentment in the Muslim world. The use of torture and indefinite detention at Guantanamo Bay has violated international human rights norms. The United States' support for authoritarian regimes in the Middle East and elsewhere has further undermined its credibility as a champion of democracy. The failure to address climate change and the withdrawal from the Paris Agreement have damaged the United States' reputation as a responsible global leader. As a result, the U.S. has lost its moral authority to set a global course or impose its will on others. The rise of China and other emerging powers has further challenged the United States' dominance and diminished its ability to shape the global agenda. The increasing multipolarity of the world order has created new opportunities for countries to pursue their own interests, independent of the United States. The British Empire, once the largest empire in history, controlled vast territories across the globe, spanning continents and oceans. The sun never set on the British Empire, a testament to its immense size and global reach. The British Empire's economic power was based on its control of trade routes, its access to natural resources, and its industrial might. The British Empire also exerted significant cultural influence, spreading the English language, legal systems, and political institutions around the world. However, despite its vast reach and power, the British Empire eventually crumbled due to overextension of resources, unsustainable military spending, and the rise of nationalist movements in its colonies. The cost of maintaining a vast empire placed a significant strain on Britain's resources. The constant need to defend its far-flung colonies required a large and expensive military. The Boer War and World War I further stretched Britain's resources thin, leaving it heavily indebted and weakened. The rise of nationalist movements in its colonies also challenged British authority and made it increasingly difficult to maintain control. India, in particular, became a hotbed of nationalist activity, eventually leading to its independence in 1947. The loss of India marked a significant decline in the British Empire's power and prestige. Similarly, the United States currently maintains a vast global military presence, with bases and troops stationed in numerous countries around the world. The cost of maintaining this military presence is enormous, consuming a large percentage of the federal budget. The United States is also involved in numerous conflicts and interventions around the world, further straining its resources. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan have cost trillions of dollars and have resulted in the loss of thousands of American lives. The United States' continued involvement in these conflicts raises questions about the sustainability of its current foreign policy. Navigating the decline and forging a new path. The decline of an empire is not a sudden event, but a gradual process marked by internal decay, erosion of soft power, and overextension. By examining the trajectories of past empires, such as the Roman Empire, the Ottoman Empire, and the British Empire, we can gain valuable insights into the challenges facing the United States today. The lessons of history provide a framework for understanding the factors that contribute to imperial decline and offer potential strategies for mitigating the negative consequences. The United States faces a complex set of challenges, including economic inequality, political polarization, declining infrastructure, and a loss of global influence. Addressing these challenges will require a comprehensive and multifaceted approach. It will also require a willingness to make difficult choices and prioritize the long-term interests of the nation over short-term political gains. Overextension and the unsustainable burden. A British Empire. Cautionary tale. The British Empire's experience offers valuable lessons for the United States, which also faces the challenge of managing a vast global network of military bases and commitments. The United States currently maintains military bases in over 80 countries around the world, a legacy of its Cold War strategy of containment. The cost of maintaining these bases is substantial, requiring billions of dollars in annual spending. Moreover, the presence of American troops in foreign countries can be a source of resentment and anti-American sentiment, potentially undermining the United States' soft power. One of the key factors that contributed to the decline of the British Empire was the rise of nationalist movements in its colonies. As these colonies developed their own sense of identity and self-determination, they increasingly resisted British rule. The cost of suppressing these nationalist movements became increasingly unsustainable, both economically and politically. The United States faces a similar challenge in its relationships with some of its allies and partners around the world. In some cases, these countries are becoming more assertive in their own foreign policies and are less willing to defer to American leadership. This trend could lead to increased tensions and conflicts, potentially requiring the United States to expend more resources to maintain its influence. The economic consequences of overextension can be severe. The British Empire's debt burden increased significantly as a result of its military spending, which ultimately contributed to its economic decline. The United States also faces a growing national debt, which could become unsustainable if military spending continues to increase. The high cost of military spending diverts resources from other important priorities, such as education, healthcare, and infrastructure. This can lead to a decline in the quality of life for ordinary Americans and could undermine the long-term competitiveness of the American economy. The United States also faces the risk of becoming over-reliant on military solutions to foreign policy challenges. The use of military force can be effective in certain situations, but it is often a blunt instrument that can have unintended consequences. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, for example, have been costly and have not achieved their intended goals. A more sustainable foreign policy would prioritize diplomacy and international cooperation, reserving the use of military force for situations where it is absolutely necessary. The British Empire's experience also highlights the importance of adapting to changing circumstances. The British Empire was slow to recognize the rise of nationalist movements and to adjust its policies accordingly. This ultimately led to its downfall. The United States must also be willing to adapt to the changing global landscape. The rise of China, the increasing importance of emerging economies, and the growing threat of climate change all require a new approach to foreign policy.